Good morning and welcome back to Football Morning Show. Masih bersama gue Hanif Tamrin yang tetap setia menemani aktivitas pagi kalian setiap jam 7 pagi. Kawan-kawanku, sorry nih kemarin kita libur ya, karena kemarin satu-satunya hari istirahat karena ada gap dari 16 besar ke perempat final. Jadi kita udah lama gak tidur my friend. Jadi mohon izin nih, kemarin gak ada FMS dulu sehari. Tapi hari ini kita kembali buat kalian, dan tentunya juga nanti akan ada eksklusif seperti biasa setiap minggunya, wawancara spesial bersama Ben Jacobs. Tapi sebelum itu kawan-kawan, kita awali dulu dengan seruput. Iya. Nice dream ya. Es kopi mengawali pagi ini kawan-kawan ya. Dan pastinya kita akan absen-absen dulu tentunya komunitas My Friends yang sudah meninggalkan jejak di kolom komentar episode kemarin. Dan tentunya dengan berbagai macam profesi yang sangat-sangat unik sekali. Antara lain adalah penjual cireng di Demak. Semangat bro jualannya ya. Semoga laku terus. Tetap semangat. Pasti ini cirengnya enak ya. Penjual popcorn di bioskop. Oh ini yang keliling nih bro ya. Yang nunggu di depan pintu masuk. Terus kalau misalnya sebelum mulai mungkin ada yang lupa. Ditawarin ya sama brother kita. Dan tentunya juga ada kuli spare part mobil di Taiwan. Pahlawan devisa guys ya. Respect setinggi-tingginya. Tentunya masih dalam suasana FIFA World Cup 2026. Kita rayakan bersama dengan beli produk REXONA X FIFA Limited Edition. Dan ikutan berburu stars bersama REXONA. Caranya gampang sekali teman-teman. Kalian tinggal beli produk REXONA apa saja. Dan jangan lupa disimpan struk pembelanjaannya. Dan kalian tinggal upload ke WhatsApp REXONA. Bang, di mana bang? WhatsApp REXONA bang. Udah disediakan di sini. Ada QR code, kalian tinggal scan, nanti langsung masuk ke WhatsApp REXONA. Nah, struk belanjanya tinggal kalian upload di situ. Untuk bisa tentunya mendapatkan hadiah langsung. Karena periode hanya berlangsung dari tanggal 1 Mei hingga 31 Juli 2026. REXONA adalah deodoran pertama dengan teknologi amino aktif. Tentunya dengan 3 kali proteksi melawan keringat dan bau badan. Berkat REXONA tentunya Football Morning Show bisa disaksikan secara gratis setiap hari kawan-kawan ya. Selama periode Piala Dunia ya. Jadi jangan lupa kalian komen W REXONA di kolom komentar. Dan tentunya juga jangan lupa disimpan tombol hype-nya buat FMS. 2 kali seminggu lah minimal. Biar videonya tetap selalu muncul di beranda YouTube kalian. Oke, kita awali dulu tentunya langsung dari Spanyol teman-teman. Di mana ada sebuah breaking news yang baru saja di-announce kemarin. Jika Barcelona resmi mempermanenkan transfer Joao Cancelo. Nice dream sekali. Karena sebelumnya memang Joao Cancelo ini statusnya masih loan ya di paruh kedua musim lalu. Dan ternyata masih tampil ciamik bersama Barcelona. Ada level of versatility juga yang dia miliki. Mampu bermain sebagai back sayap kiri, back sayap kanan. Ya apapun lah yang dibutuhkan oleh Hansi Flick. Dan akhirnya kesepakatan sudah tercapai dengan mahar transfer sebesar 10 juta euro untuk mempermanenkan Joao Cancelo kembali bergabung bersama Barcelona dengan status transfer permanen ya. Tentu yang menjadi kunci dari transfer ini bukan siapa lagi kalau bukan Hansi Flick yang ini memberikan tekanan kepada DECO dan juga Joan Laporta untuk segera mempermanenkan Joao Cancelo. Karena ini juga kemungkinan dari sisi fokus transfer Barcelona itu untuk bisa tuntas secepat mungkin teman-teman. Karena memang prioritas dari Barcelona adalah striker dan tentunya membutuhkan artileri alias waktu ya yang paling tinggi di posisi ini. Jadi Hansi Flick memutuskan lebih baik segera mempermanenkan Joao Cancelo dan memfokuskan seluruh waktu yang Barcelona punya untuk posisi striker, di mana kemungkinan saga Julian Alvarez itu akan berlangsung panjang. Dan Atletico Madrid itu mematok ya penawaran terakhir Real Madrid sebagai angka yang kurang lebih diharapkan apabila nanti mereka membuka pintu negosiasi. Ya, kurang lebih gitu. Ini juga dirilis oleh Fabrizio Romano berita ini. Jadi selamat buat fans Barcelona yang secara resmi mendapatkan Joao Cancelo secara permanen. Tapi tidak hanya Cancelo saja. Iya, ini breaking news yang juga baru saja dilansir tadi malam dini hari. Jika dilansir oleh Diario AS, Karim Adeyemi mencapai kesepakatan personal dengan Barcelona. Ya, Hansi Flick ini sudah personally approve kepindahan Karim Adeyemi dari Borussia Dortmund ke Barcelona, teman-teman ya. Dan DECO sudah mencapai kesepakatan personal dengan sang pemain. Karena Adeyemi ini sangat-sangat fleksibel. Dia bisa bermain sebagai sayap kanan, sayap kiri, bahkan false nine. Karena dalam 4 musim penampilannya di Borussia Dortmund, dia sudah mencetak 36 gol dari 146 penampilan. Tentu kehadiran dari Adeyemi itu yang menjadi korban itu lebih kepada winger wonderkidnya Barcelona, REUNI yang memang sepertinya akan dilepas, dipinjamkan ke klub lain karena kehadiran dari seorang Karim Adeyemi. Nah, sekarang tinggal menuntaskan club to club talk statusnya. Di mana menurut Diario AS, DECO sudah resmi juga melemparkan penawaran kepada Borussia Dortmund, menunggu bagaimana klub asal Jerman tersebut merespon penawaran resmi dari Barcelona. Dan tentu ini akan membuat lini depan Barcelona semakin mengerikan, terutama apabila nanti Julian Alvarez juga datang. Bayangin, kiri ya ada Anthony Gordon ya, ada Rafinha gitu kan. Di tengah Ferran Torres dan juga tentunya Julian Alvarez. Di kanan Karim Adeyemi ya, Lamine Yamal. Gila guys, ini GG. Tinggal merem aja guys, masangnya yang mana ya. 3 kompetisi bisa dilewati nih dengan kedalaman yang luar biasa seperti ini ya. Jadi itu kita lihat nanti apakah ini bisa segera terrealisasi. Dan tentunya DECO ingin segera menuntaskan transfer ini agar bisa fokus mendatangkan posisi striker. Kurang lebih gitu teman-teman ya. Dan tentunya kita tinggalkan dulu Spanyol, kita langsung masuk ke Inggris kawan-kawan. Di mana tentunya untuk bab-bab Inggris tidak elok kalau kita tidak menelpon BFF gua, Sir Ben Jacobs. Anjay, pakai Sir coy ya. Karena dia tidak tidur selama bursa transfer ini. Oke, dari kemarin kita mau teleponan, kesian dia ada aja kendalanya. Tiba-tiba dia disuruh terbang lah, jadinya kita diundur ya. Kesian dia, lagi ini banget guys, lagi disuruh pergi kemana-mana sama TALKSPORT ya. Jadi tanpa berlama-lama, kan dia juga nih yang pertama kali broke the news di bulan Maret kalau Manchester United tertarik sama Andre Santos. Nah itu nggak direvisit lagi sampai akhirnya kemarin menjadi breaking news. Nah kita coba telepon Ben Jacobs untuk bisa menggali lebih dalam seperti apa behind the scene dari breaking news kemarin. Let's go Ben! Hello, good morning, Ben. How are you?
Everything is good. The World Cup's heating up. I'm here in Los Angeles, and I'll be watching Spain against Belgium in a couple of days.
Right. And now that the United States is officially, out of the World Cup, which country do you cover?
So I'll follow Spain and then hopefully get to see some England if I'm lucky as well, if we beat Norway anyway. But I'll likely follow Spain or Belgium, the winner of this game, into the next round, and then I'll head to New York and New Jersey for the business end of the tournament. I'm particularly excited as well today about the game between France and Morocco. I think that's going to be one of the ties of the tournament.
Right. Exciting stuff for you. Let's talk about transfer latest right now. And we saw a deal done pretty quickly for Andre Santos. Like the name that have been circulating to replace Casemiro has always been the Elliot Anderson and Matheus Fernandes. We rarely heard about Andre Santos since the beginning. Is this a panic buying from Man United, or is it like some sort of like things that has been going with just that under the radar, Ben?
I don't think it's a panic buy. This was an exclusive that I broke in March, that Manchester United were interested in signing André Santos. He's been on their radar since last summer when Manchester United and Chelsea did a deal for Alejandro Garnacho. André Santos was mentioned. The thing that's changed in the last few weeks or months is that, one, Chelsea are prepared to sell, and two, Xabi Alonso is happy for Santos to leave. And in addition, the player wants to go somewhere where he can get more minutes. Whereas when Liam Rosenior was the Chelsea manager, as you might understand, because he'd had Santos at Strasbourg, he was intent on integrating him into the Chelsea first team squad. And there's a point of difference here as well, because at Strasbourg, Santos was played in a more advanced role and he added attacking output to his game. Manchester United, because they've got so many 8s or 10s, will see Santos as a defined 6. The fee is £48 million and £2 million in add-ons. The contract agreed is 5 years. And in addition to that, what I think you'll see, subject to the formalisation of the deal, is Santos given a really defined role as a 6, which is the same as Brazil see the player. And although a lot of Manchester United fans are maybe still waiting for what they perceive to be a marquee signing, what's very interesting about this deal is Chelsea fans are extremely disappointed at large to see the player go. They think they're losing a top talent. And I've been with Brazil once during this World Cup, and journalists there agree with the Manchester United view of the player profile. They think that Santos is going to be the player in the coming years to fill the shoes of Casemiro and be a future number 6 for his country. And if Manchester United and Brazil are right, then this could be a special signing with a high ceiling, even though he still needs a bit of development to really become that starting dominant Premier League central midfielder. But there's a lot of potential there.
Right. And does it mean that with the arrival of André Santos, the possibility of Man United signing another marquee signing is officially gone, or is it still alive, Ben?
I think it's still alive. In an ideal world, they wanted 3 midfielders. One has come in André Santos. Ederson will have to wait and see, because there's going to be a thorough medical check taking place, and then we'll get clarity as to whether Manchester United are going to proceed with that deal. In addition to that, they're still looking for that kind of starter with proven Premier League experience. Ederson has a lot of potential, so does Santos, but we know from their pursuit of Elliot Anderson, losing out to Man City, from their interest in Mateus Fernandes, who's played more games and Premier League minutes than a player like Santos, from their love for Sandro Tonali, who ended up going to Tottenham, from their interest in Aurelien Tchouameni, who, although hasn't played in the Premier League, could start and no doubt acclimatise very quickly, much like Casemiro did. All of these names are in a slightly different category of profile because they're more established. And even with Santos arriving, my expectation is that Manchester United will add at least one more midfielder. And if Ederson is to be completed subject to a thorough medical, then that will mean that 3 arrive. And if the Ederson deal doesn't happen, who knows? It might be 2 more midfielders plus André Santos for Manchester United.
You've mentioned that there will be another thorough medical for Ederson. What would be the issue? And if, assuming Ederson deals fall through, why Man United does not look for a bargain player such as Manu Kone, who performed very well in the World Cup and available for €50 million, which relatively within Man United budget, or in this case, another French player who performed remarkably well in Serie A last season, who's also in the market, such as Kefren Turam, with the same range of budgets. What is the actual plan for Man United here, Ben? Is it like to spread the budget and get quantity, or are they looking for a quality with a bargain price?
Yeah, so first of all, they have a high volume of business to do because they might need to strengthen on the left-hand side. They could yet explore a centre-back, although it's not a high priority. Maybe another experienced striker, especially if Joshua Zirkzee was to end up leaving, the left side, but Marcus Rashford's situation needs to be resolved, and multiple midfielders. So there's a lot to do, even a backup goalkeeper, because Onana's gone back to Turkey, Bayındır expected to depart. So add all of that up and you have a situation where Man United have to think about collective spend, not just individual. Plus the fact that as they look for other midfielders, my feeling is that Premier League experience might be more important, which is why as of now, they're not moving on some of the other names that you mentioned. Even another profile I could throw into the mix who has a long-standing Manchester United interest, and Christopher Vivell in particular was driving it, Angelo Stiller, a player that might be available in the market and has been linked with Manchester United in the past. But if they go down this route of Santos, formalised likely today, and then Ederson, if that deal gets done, the third midfielder that comes in may more likely require proven Premier League experience, and that's where there is interest in Alex Scott. There's been formative talks historically in the last kind of 2 months with the camp of Bruno Guimaraes, but it's Arsenal obviously that appear to be moving on that front at the moment. But that's probably the short answer, that if they are to formalise Ederson and Santos, the third midfielder maybe has to be a more established Premier League name that can acclimatise instantly and make an impact next season as ultimately a starter. And then with Ederson, look, we have to be respectful to the player and to Manchester United. So every medical is thorough, but this medical will have some extra checks, and some of the original medical tests were already done whilst Ederson was on duty with Brazil. And until we get the results of those, we don't have any clarity as to whether Manchester United are or aren't going to proceed. So the medical is not just a formality, as is sometimes the case in transfers, but they wouldn't be doing the medical if the deal was already off, despite suggestions of reports in Brazil. So we'll have to be patient. We'll have to wait and see what the results are of the medical, and only when Manchester United assess those results will they decide whether they want to proceed.
You've mentioned that the third profile, should Andre Santos and Ederson is being formalized, have to be a proven Premier League records. And there's been a reports about Alex Scott refuse the contract extension from Bournemouth. Is there any truth in this report, and how do you see it will be developed into some of the big clubs that is currently targeting Alex Scott? And
so I'm not aware that Alex Scott has refused a contract extension yet. Those talks with Bournemouth are ongoing, and they've been relatively confident, certainly since the end of the season. And part of that optimism is because they're prepared to offer Scott a release clause, which would come to effect in 2027. And part of the optimism stems from the fact that even if Scott doesn't sell, Bournemouth insists that they'll keep him for another year anyway. But 3 clubs have inquired in recent weeks. One is Man City, one is Manchester United, and one is Arsenal. Obviously, Arsenal are concurrently exploring multiple midfield targets, including Bruno Guimaraes, so we'll have to see what direction they go in. Bournemouth value Scott at 80 million, and those contract talks with Scott started in March and will continue throughout the coming weeks. And Bournemouth are hoping to get clarity in the early part of this pre-season. They don't want to get to August or towards the end of the window and still not know where they stand, because the longer it goes on without clarity, the more encouraged clubs will feel. So my expectation is Manchester United will be in the race for Alex Scott. Arsenal could be there, especially if they can't agree a deal with Newcastle for Bruno Guimaraes. And don't rule out Manchester City or even Chelsea, and Bayern Munich have looked in the past as well. So high volume of interest. And we've heard some reports in the last few weeks or months that 60 million will do it for Alex Scott. That's not quite my understanding. I'm told if Bournemouth are to sell now, 80 million is the number, and there remains a clear preference from the club to get Scott to extend.
Right, and let's talk about Arsenal a little bit, Ben. You've reported that Bruno Guimaraes has officially informed Newcastle about his desire to move to Arsenal should both clubs can reach an agreement. What is the latest on this, Ben?
So Bruno Guimaraes would like to leave Newcastle. Newcastle want to keep their captain. It's a fascinating transfer because it's not just about the player, it's about the Newcastle project. And of course, Newcastle fans won't be happy if their captain leaves, especially off the back of Sandro Tonali also departing. Newcastle don't need to sell financially. They've brought in up to 100 million for Tonali. They've got 70 million for Anthony Gordon. They've got other players that they can sell if they so wish, including Tino Livramento, for example, who's drawing interest from Arsenal and also Manchester City. And yet Guimaraes would like to leave. A direct formal offer at the time we're recording hasn't yet been made from Arsenal to Newcastle, but a verbal offer has been tabled via intermediaries. So Newcastle are aware of the Arsenal interest. And now that Guimaraes is returning from the World Cup, let's see whether this develops. Arsenal have got other midfielders like Alex Scott, Bouadi at Morocco, and a few other names on their list of potential options. And yet Guimaraes is high in their thinking, and they know that Arsenal, Newcastle that is, are going to likely make that formal direct bid to test Newcastle United's resolve. Now, if Newcastle lost Tonali and Guimaraes in the same window, that will not sit well with a lot of this Newcastle fan base who are passionate, who don't really understand how PIF can't flex their financial muscle. But of course, PSR and squad cost ratio and financial fair play, all of these are factors as to why Newcastle can't just spend. And since Alexander Isak's departure and now losing other big stars, it's a key summer for Newcastle. And my expectation is that selling Tonali and selling Gordon and potentially even selling Bruno Guimaraes, it's not just about balancing the books or having players that want to leave. It's about Newcastle reinvesting. Toure has already joined. Stoya was announced today. And there'll be others in the pipeline for Newcastle. So don't be surprised if they get big money for Bruno Guimaraes, if they then proceed to actually spend a lot of the money and try and make some statement signings of their own. The closest Newcastle signing in the pipeline is Johan Manzarbi. A 60 million euros fee has almost been agreed between Newcastle and Freiburg, and talks are ongoing on the player side. Newcastle are relatively cautious, not because they don't hold optimism, but they obviously got burned with Victor Munoz, where they thought that deal was going to happen and Liverpool hijacked it. And Aston Villa made a call there because Amadou Onana got injured at the World Cup. He sadly ruptured his ACL. So let's see whether any other clubs enter the race. But Newcastle are currently, at the time of recording, the front runners there. So let's kind of see for Newcastle how the second half of the window goes. They obviously want to keep hold of Bruno Guimaraes, but Arsenal are pushing.
Right. And for Arsenal, is there any updates as well in regards to Morgan Rogers? Several reports says that Aston Villa would like to quote up north £130 million for Morgan Rogers. What's the truth around this, Ben?
Yeah, I think Aston Villa are entitled to a high valuation in an inflated market. We may not get that many movements with the World Cup ongoing and the business end of the tournament for England, but Villa still need a big sale. So clubs feel that that price will drop, but Villa are entitled to start with a high valuation because we're seeing a lot of players go for that kind of money. If Yan Diomande on the right, but can also play on the left-hand side, is 130 million euros for Leipzig's valuation, let's again see if PSG pay that. But if that's Leipzig's starting point, then why can't Morgan Rogers be £130 million as far as Villa are concerned? And yet the player side believe offers of over 80 million will be entertained. If there's a bidding war, maybe that gets a little bit higher. But last year, when Rodgers extended at Aston Villa, he put one extra year on his contract. And the feeling at the time was this summer, Villa wouldn't unduly stand in his way, and those close to Rodgers will push for a move away from Aston Villa if an offer of in excess of £80 million is made. But when I say push, I don't mean Rodgers is going to hand in a transfer request. I don't mean Rodgers is going to create any bad blood, because he loves Unai Emery. He's got Champions League football. But if it's the right deal for Rodgers, the right deal for Villa, then the player will say that he prefers to leave rather than stay. So we need to keep a really close eye on Arsenal in particular, because Rodgers is right up there with one of their leading targets on that left-hand side. And my expectation is Arsenal will place an opening bid for Morgan Rogers. They like other names like Junior Krupi, in a dream world, Julian Alvarez. And that shows you that with Leandro Trossard potentially moving to Turkey and Gabriel Martinelli maybe being up for sale as well, Arsenal are looking to make a statement signing over on that left-hand side, and Morgan Rogers is currently their top target. PSG have looked as well, but their focus is on Yan Diomande and Magnus Aklius. Chelsea love Morgan Rogers as well, so that could be one to watch. Man United as well, but their priority is to put the bulk of their spend on the central midfield. But don't forget that Jason Wilcox played a role in Rogers' development at Man City, and Michael Carrick briefly had Rogers at Middlesbrough, so there's clear appreciation there as well. But Arsenal consider themselves to be the front runners. It will all just depend on what Aston Villa's actual asking price is once formal club-to-club negotiations begin.
Okay, and let's talk about Liverpool a little bit, Ben. Does the Richard Hughes move to Al Ahly impacted Liverpool movement in the market? Because everything apparently a bit slow, particularly to find replacement for Mo Salah. Considering also that Yan Diomande are now preferring move to PSG compared to Liverpool.
Yeah, I think Richard Hughes is committed to the summer. He's not doing two jobs at once or anything like that, so no real impact. The feeling is Richard Hughes won't renew, but remember his contract expires in summer 2027. It's not done yet with Al Hilal, and yet Al Hilal are working on the premise that Hughes will join, and there's a possibility that that comes as early as after this summer window. Hughes knows Simon Francis, the former Bournemouth technical director, really well, and Francis has already started working at Al Hilal, so the feeling is they're a double act, they're a team, and that eventually Hughes will end up at Al Hilal. But it's not going to happen today, tomorrow, and Hughes is committed to supporting Andoni Iraola and getting Liverpool what they need from this transfer window. The slowness of replacing Mo Salah is partially down to the World Cup, and another factor is that they tried for Yan Diomande and the player finally communicated that he prefers to join PSG. The next target for Liverpool is Bradley Barcola, but Barcola's not going to be available now because, one, PSG say they don't want to sell, and two, if they change that stance, which I'm told is possible, it will be because Diomande arrives and likely Magnus Aklius joins too. So Liverpool can't make any progress on Barcola yet because they have to wait for PSG and see if they change their position on a sale. Then you have Yankuba Minta. That's a target at Brighton, but it's not developing yet. Mateus Fernandez Pardo and Syed Al-Mala, two other players that Liverpool have looked at. So Liverpool don't get sucked in by the noise. They stay very calm in windows. They don't panic. They don't look to do things urgently on timescales that don't suit them. They work discreetly, privately. They get their business done very professionally. They rarely get sucked into bidding wars, and they try and avoid all of the media headlines because it's a long summer ahead. Half of the window still remains, and my expectation is Richard Hughes will drive the business and be fully committed to Liverpool this window, and by the end of the window they'll get what they need.
And let's talk about the right back market a little bit, Ben, because a lot of teams are looking for a right back this summer. One of the hottest properties, Michael Coyote, which recently extended the contract at Brentford. So what does the right back market looks like for Man City, Liverpool and Arsenal?
Yeah, Arsenal and Man City definitely looking for a right back. Liverpool need to decide because we know they've looked at right backs in the past. Connor Bradley and Jeremy Frimpong were on, off, not fit throughout the last season, but they're still Liverpool players. So you've got two profiles that Liverpool have big faith in. It wouldn't be a total surprise if Liverpool had a fullback, but I sense at the moment the main priority is on those wide areas. They've already brought in Victor Munoz. They want pace. They want a Mo Salah replacement, and central midfield is going to be a priority because Curtis Jones could go. There's a question mark also over Alexis McAllister's future. But yeah, right back for Liverpool could be an area where they look to strengthen, but it feels more important for Manchester City and also Arsenal. As you say, Coyote extended on a new long-term contract until summer 2032. He's going nowhere. You've got Tino Livramento, who might be available on the market, and Man City and Arsenal have looked in the past there. Another really interesting right back to watch, who can also play on the left-hand side, is going to be Malo Gusto at Chelsea. Chelsea are not desperate to sell, and their starting valuation is very high, 75 million. But Gusto may be prepared to leave. A lot, for me, will depend on, is Reece James going to be classified as a right back or a central midfielder predominant under Xabi Alonso? And if he was a central midfielder, does that give Gusto the opportunity to try and fight for a starting spot on that right-hand side, or even as he did under Enzo Maresca, switch to the left-hand side, despite the fact that Chelsea have brought in other players in that position? Chavaria is one that they're trying to get over the line from Rayo Vallecano. Valentin Barco can play in that position. Palestra's obviously come in on the right, but he can play on the left-hand side too. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Xabi Alonso uses a lot of versatile players, especially the ones that are capable of either switching sides or playing in multiple positions. But Malo Gusto and his future could be another one to watch. And we know that Enzo Maresca really likes the player. At this stage, Man City sources say it's nothing more than that. But once again, it's a long window ahead, and it wouldn't surprise me if those looking for a right back factor in Malo Gusto to their thinking, because he's a top profile. It's just whether or not anyone's prepared to meet Chelsea's relatively high valuation.
Right. And there's been a report in Spain that Aurelian Tchouaméni is close to agree a contract extension with Real Madrid. What does it mean for Rodri's future at Man City, Ben? Will he stay, or is he gonna stay for another year and then eventually move on as a free agent to Real Madrid?
Yeah, there's a contract offer on the table for an extension for Rodri. It's not been agreed yet. Real Madrid still not discounting making a move for Rodri, whether this summer or next summer. So that's an open situation. And as you say, Aurelian Tchouaméni has verbally agreed a Real Madrid extension. It keeps him at the club until 2031. The net wage is 13 million, according to my information. And Real had always been open to offering Tchouaméni a new deal, but the player wanted clarity as to whether someone would come in his position and what his role would be under Jose Mourinho. Mourinho communicated very quickly that Tchouaméni in his eyes was untouchable. So then this deal got done. And it was always likely to be those two extremes of the player asking to leave or Real Madrid offering him a new contract. And in the end, the new contract has been signed. Tchouaméni not too concerned whether Rodri does or doesn't arrive now, because he backs himself to hold down his starting spot. And that was indicated to him in terms of the talks over contract extensions, that he was viewed as an integral Real Madrid starter. So Tchouaméni fully committed to Real Madrid. The deal, I'm told, has actually now been signed. So 24 hours ago, it was verbally agreed. But even though the player is obviously fully focused on France and currently with the World Cup squad, you don't need to necessarily be in person, despite the fact we see videos and signing ceremonies and all of that. But I'm told the lawyers have already approved it, and it's basically a signed deal. So Tchouaméni will stay at Real Madrid, and his contract will run until summer 2031.
Can we see Man City move for Ayoub Boadi as a contingency plan should Rodri refuse the contract extensions? Because there's been rumors that Man City also view Ayoub Boadi quite high, and there is a possibility that the price of Ayoub Boadi slightly cheaper if they to buy Ayoub Boadi this summer and loan it back to Lille for another year.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Boadi for Man City, for Manchester United, Chelsea have even looked, Bayern could be there as well, and Arsenal. So a few clubs are looking, and Lille's clear preference is to do a deal that, through whatever structure, loan, pre-agreement, the deal sees him play for Lille for one more season and then moves in summer 2027. The pursuit of Boadi is not really linked to Rodri per se, because Man United know if they move for Boadi, they get a younger midfielder and could come into the squad, whether now or whether for the future. But for Man City, they know that Rodri's not going to be around forever. So there's a kind of point of difference there, because Manu will just look at Boadi as somebody, if they move, they want a top young talent, and Casemiro's already left. Whereas with Man City, they don't mind that overlap with Rodri, because they know that Rodri's age means he's not going to be around forever. But there may be a willingness more for Man City than other clubs, because if Rodri stays, to delay the Boadi signing, because then they still will be relatively well covered in the centre of the park. So let's see how the clubs approach it with Lille. My info is that Lille want 100 million euros to do a deal instantly, but they'd be prepared to lower that price to 80 million euros if the clubs agree to a loan back or a pre-agreement. And as it stands, Manchester City are open to that particular formula. But let's see how things develop, because as Boadi continues to perform at this World Cup, his valuation is rising, suitors are only growing, and Man City are certainly not the only club in this race.
And obviously, today's game will be the ultimate audition for him, right? Against France. It will be crazy. Let's talk about Spurs a little bit, Ben. They're not done spending, aren't they? Rafael Leao has been linked to them, an exploratory loan with obligation to buy, and Eli Junior Krupi as well as Cody Gakpo. What are the latest development in terms of Spurs looking for a wide attacking striker, Ben?
Yeah, Tottenham have sorted out their goalkeeper situation, including Kinski signing a new deal and Dubravka coming in, sorted out their defence, sorted out their midfield, and now it's all attack for Tottenham. And likely they want to bring in two players, one that's more of a forward, maybe an out-and-out number 9, or a slightly more versatile attacker, and then a left winger. Savinho remains one to watch. Tottenham have obviously been in talks for him since last summer. It all depends not on Enzo Maresca really, and more the Man City board, because they were the ones that blocked the deal last summer. Cody Gakpo could be one to watch as well. He's certainly a player that Tottenham appreciate. Liverpool are not desperate to sell. Despite some reports in the Netherlands, my information is that Gakpo hasn't directly told Liverpool he wants to leave. And if a sale is to happen, Liverpool will be pointing towards other deals, like Leipzig's valuation for Yan Diomande, or the 70 million that saw Anthony Gordon leave Newcastle United for Barcelona. So that's going to be quite an expensive deal to pull off. Junior Krupi is also appreciated by Spurs and Arsenal. Chelsea have looked in the past too. My information on Junior Krupi is if he is to leave, and it is an if, then the player would lean towards staying within the Premier League. So we should keep an eye there on some of the big 6 clubs. But Tottenham are going to continue to be active. And remember one thing, they can spend money because their wage bill isn't as high as other clubs. They are compliant with the last part of financial fair play from the season they were in Europe. They've injected 100 million extra into their business, not all of which, but some of which will be spent on transfers. The younger members of the Lewis family post-departure of Daniel Levy are trying to make statement signings and back Roberto De Zerbi and get back into the Champions League. And as importantly, the Premier League domestic rules are changing, and Tottenham enter into the second half of the summer out of FFP accounting and into only domestic accounting, because they're heading into a cycle without any European football. And under these new rules, you can spend 85% compared to 70% in financial fair play of revenue on transfers, wages, and agent fees. But in the first year, because the rules are new, there's like a transition, and clubs that exceed that 85% by a further 30% won't incur any, or certainly not severe, penalties. So Tottenham can exploit that loophole and spend big, and all of these factors combined are why they are being so aggressive in the market.
Right. And just to close, let's touch a little bit on Chelsea topic, Ben. After mostly outgoings in the form of Cucurella and now Andre Santos, when can we expect progress for Chelsea incoming transfer? We've heard about Pep Chavarria and then the interest for Maxime Lacroix. What are the latest development, particularly on the centre-back department, Ben?
Yeah, so Maxence Lacroix is a player that Chelsea still like, and a bid is still anticipated, and that's going to be one to watch, in my opinion, in the coming days, because Crystal Palace have been able to make a signing of their own at centre-back, the Spanish international Oscar Mingueza, who will join on a free transfer after leaving Celta Vigo. Charlie Cresswell is another player that Crystal Palace really like. So that may open the door for more productive negotiations for Lacroix. Jacobo Ramon is also there on the list. Let's see what Palace's valuation is for Lacroix too, because Jan-Paul van Hecker is maybe the yardstick at 52 million from Brighton to Tottenham with only 1 year left on his contract. And you can understand why Crystal Palace may ask for similar money. So a lot may depend on the valuation there. But even though there was a bit of a fallout over a failed signing and triggering of the release clause for Michael Olise long before he ended up moving to Bayern, Chelsea and Palace have got a great relationship, so that is still a deal that could get done. If not, Jacobo Ramon at Como, another option. Chelsea are looking for tall defenders with strength. They still want a creative-minded attacker. Let's see when Xabi Alonso starts what happens with the goalkeeper situation. Mike Pender's highly rated. Rob Sanchez was the number one last season. And then Chavaria is another player that I think stands a very strong chance of joining Chelsea potentially. There's advanced talks ongoing between Rayo Vallecano and Chelsea are trying to find a solution outside of the release clause. And although it may be true to say that Chelsea haven't made that many signings, at least not in the last few days or weeks, don't forget that Valentin Barco is coming in. That was pre-agreed before the window opens. Giovanni Quenda for 51 million euros and 1.3 million in add-ons was confirmed yesterday. That was a pre-agreement last summer. He did an extra year at Sporting and he now joins Chelsea. And Emega arrives as well. So Chelsea have actually been active already with incomings and outgoings. We need to also keep an eye on the striker situation because one of Nicholas Jackson and Liam Delap is likely to depart. And it's very possible that Trevor Chalobah is sold as well, with interest from both Inter and Como.
Just one final questions, Ben. Why is it no Premier League team is coming for Dusan Vlahovic, despite that he's available for free?
Yeah, Dusan Vlahovic is going to be somebody that is a market opportunity. I think the player has never been in a rush to decide on his future. When you get a free agent, sometimes they want to wait. Sometimes they want to see who comes in. They've got a lot of cards. So it's not always based on only the club decision. It can also be based on the player and whether he wants to take a little bit more time. Players heading into free agencies sometimes want the summer to think and to assess with their family. So that's part of the reason. Historically, the other factor has always been some concerns over a persistent groin injury and whether or not that puts off clubs. But that was kind of maybe 2 years ago when Arsenal were linked with the player. But those sort of niggling injuries haven't entirely gone away. And then wage maybe is a factor as well in all of this too. So there's a few variables there, but obviously Dusan Vlahovic is going to be a very interesting transfer saga to watch in the coming days.
Right. Thank you so much, Ben. I think that's it for this week. And looking forward to see you again next week. Thank you so much, Ben.
Look forward to it. Always a pleasure. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Ya, itu dia tadi. Tentunya teleponan dulu sama Ben Jacobs. Sudah selesai bab Inggris, cukup dalam, semua kedapatan. Seluruh tim kita bahas tadi. Dan sekarang tentunya waktunya kita masuk sedikit ke Italia ya, sebelum menutup teman-teman. Dimana pas banget dari pertanyaan terakhir gua tadi sama Ben Jacobs itu sebenarnya adalah bridging untuk kabar yang paling anyar dari Italia. Diawali dari Juventus. Karena sepi peminat, ini dilansir oleh TalkSPORT ya. Karena sepi peminat ya, Dusan Vlahovic kembali menawarkan diri ke Juventus. Oke, tadi gue nanya sama Ben Jacobs, kenapa tim Premier League gak ada yang nawar doi gitu kan? Karena realnya, secara situasi realnya yang benar-benar menginginkan Dusan Vlahovic dan menawarkan kontrak bener-bener real nih, ini udah di table ini penawarannya, itu cuman Fenerbahce kawan-kawanku ya. Fenerbahce dari Turki, itu pun karena ada Vincenzo Italiano di situ ya. Dan karena sepi peminat, Barcelona akhirnya nolak dia dan udah berupaya dengan berbagai macam ini ya, agentnya coba seeding ya via media-media, siapa tahu ada yang tertarik gitu kan. Dibuatlah rumor-rumor Bayern suka sama dia padahal enggak. Barcelona katanya kan suka sama dia padahal Barcelona enggak mempertimbangkan gitu kan. Nah, akhirnya nyerah juga dia nih. Cobalah tawarin diri lagi ke Juventus gitu kan. Barangkali masih bisa. Nah, ini juga akhirnya direspon oleh Juventus sebagai tentunya opportunity untuk membuat penawaran VLAHOVIC itu lebih rendah dari yang mereka tawarkan terakhir. Ini nggak akan ketemu-ketemu coy ya. Nggak akan ketemu-ketemu. Udahlah inilah. Ini berdua udahlah. Kata gue kalau udah berpisah aja gitu. Karena ini udah kayak hubungan toksik nih jatuhnya. Terakhir kali Juventus menawarkan 8 juta euro gaji. Ya plus signing on fee. Ditolak sama Dusan Vlahovic. Dia bilang nanti pasti banyak nih yang mau gitu kan. Dia cabut. Kontraknya udah resmi berakhir, dia jadi free agent. Ternyata nggak ada takers, nggak ada tawaran di mejanya dia. Ya karena dijelasin sama Ben Jacobs tadi, permasalahan concern terkait historical cederanya dia, kemudian tingginya permintaan gaji dia, dan lain sebagainya teman-teman. Jadi Inggris tuh, mayoritas tim-tim Inggris tuh nggak ada yang ngebid gitu, nggak ada yang nawarin kontrak ke Dusan Vlahovic. Karena sepi peminat ini jadi kebakaran jenggot nih. Coba nawarin diri lagi. Nah, Carnavelli ini justru menjadikan momen buat dia. Ya udah kalau Dusan Vlahovic mau balik lagi, kita tawar gajinya 6 juta aja. Ini kan ngadi-ngadi juga maksud gua gitu. Kecuali kalau lu udah resmi sama Kolomuani, ini Kolomuani juga belum datang. Feeling gue mah guys, ini mah guys ya, ini mah akan ketemu guys ya. Dua-duanya pada jual mahal, gue nggak ngerti lagi. Udahlah kita lupakan saja lah inilah ya. Gitu gue rasa nih nggak akan ketemu nih berdua nih ya. Selanjutnya kita masuk sedikit ke Milan, di mana setelah kehadiran Ruben Amorim, Fikayo Tomori ini masuk daftar jual AC Milan kawan-kawan ya. Ini tidak masuk dalam skema Ruben Amorim. Sadly, salah satu pemain yang menurut gua cukup bagus di AC Milan. Dan menurut Sport Mediaset, ini mereka menawarkan Fikayo Tomori ke tim-tim Inggris. Dan yang berminat itu adalah tim yang baru saja promosi bersama Frank Lampard. Siapa lagi kalau bukan Coventry City. Sayangnya, tawaran dari Coventry City itu ditolak oleh Fikayo Tomori. Padahal kan ini adalah anak emasnya Lampard dulu ya. Lampard itu sering sekali memberikan kesempatan menit bermain kepada Fikayo Tomori. Tapi sang pemain lebih memilih untuk mungkin destinasi yang lebih established ketimbang tim-tim promosi. Ini kawan kita nggak belajar nih. Nggak lihat dia Sunderland musim lalu nih melesat kawan ya. Jadi jangan remehkan Frank Lampard itu. Kalau Frank Lampard di Championship mungkin bagus. Mungkin Premier League kan suka agak ini ya, turbulence ya. Jadi mungkin kita lihat ya kemana sebelumnya Fikayo Tomori sempat diminati oleh Juventus. Ya musim yang lalu kalau kalian ingat. Jadi watch out, bisa saja. Kalau Gleison Bremer cabut ya, jadi cabut nih kan lagi diminati sama Bayern Munich, bisa saja. Menurut gua Fikayo Tomori jadi salah satu alternatif yang dipertimbangkan oleh Juventus ya. Dan upaya dari Inter Milan mencari sosok center back yang baru di mana harga Chalobah itu tidak kunjung turun ya, diminta oleh Chelsea sebesar 35 juta pound alias hampir 40 juta euro. Itu membuat akhirnya Inter Milan mencoba mencari alternatif lain dalam diri John LUCUMI yang juga tentunya ini sedang dipertimbangkan untuk diakuisisi oleh Juventus. Dilansir oleh Sport Italia, LUCUMI memiliki klausa release clause di kontraknya sebesar 28 juta euro. Baik Juventus maupun Inter Milan menolak ya tentunya membayar segitu untuk John LUCUMI yang juga sudah berusia cukup matang di puncak usia produktif 28 tahun teman-teman. Dan Juventus mencoba menawarkan Fabio Miretti untuk bisa melunakkan bolonya untuk mau menjual kepada Juventus. Sementara Inter Milan itu lebih kepada cash tetapi tentu tidak di angka 28 juta euro. Kita lihat nanti apakah John LUCUMI lebih memilih ke Juventus atau ke Inter Milan dalam hal ini. Karena memang Inter butuh opsi yang sepadan karena setelah tidak yakin dengan harga Omar Sole yang diminta Udinese 30 juta. Kemudian Trevoh Chalobah harganya 40 juta. Ya barangkali John LUCUMI ini bisa didapatkan dengan harga kurang lebih 20 sampai 25 juta euro ya. Range-nya di kisaran itu yang ingin ditawarkan oleh Inter Milan. Kita lihat nanti kemana destinasi dari pemain asal Kolombia ini teman-teman. Karena menjadi rebutan banyak tim ya. Itu dia beberapa episode kali ini. Materi yang bisa kita sampaikan semuanya gue rasa udah di touch. Dan tentunya gue ingin mengingatkan kalian semua untuk bergabung ke komunitas Discord kita. Di situ akan banyak sekali informasi-informasi seputar berbagai hal yang penting, seperti nanti kita akan bagi-bagi free ya, paket ultimate video untuk kalian menyaksikan pembukaan musim Premier League secara gratis ya. Tentunya juga ada berbagai macam informasi tentang pertandingan-pertandingan yang mau kita siarin selama pre-season. Dan tentunya kalau kalian mau ikutan berdiskusi di late night show, nah, ada segmen video-video call kan, nah itu masuknya di Discord ya teman-teman ya. Jadi kalian bisa curhat di situ ya, bisa ikutan, bisa ngobrol ya. Dan tentunya gue ingin menyampaikan terima kasih buat kalian semua yang tetap mensupport, dan pastinya kita masuk ke milestone berikutnya. Untuk 500.000 kita akan coba bidding ya. Ikutan bidding, gue nggak janji gue bisa menangin, tapi gue akan ikut biddingnya untuk bisa mendapatkan salah satu dari kompetisi Eropa selain Premier League. Premier League udah gak kebeli guys ya. Musim depan tuh ada kemungkinan kita bisa ngebid dulu aja, yang penting ikutan gitu kan. Berapa sih paling ya? Tahu lah berapa juta dolar. Tahu gitu cari duitnya ntar guys. Kan kita ada REXONA pastinya. Kita percayanya sama REXONA aja guys ya. Percaya sama REXONA dan sponsor-sponsor kita di musim depan. Oke, thank you so much buat kalian semua, tetap semangat. Walaupun hari-hari semakin sulit, ekonomi agak ya gitulah teman-teman. Kita bertahan dulu aja ya. Bertahan dulu sambil apa? Sambil nonton FMS. Jadi bola itu dan olahraga sedikit membuat kita bisa escape ya. Atau apa ya namanya, inilah ya, lari dari seluruh kepenatan yang ada di rutinitas kita. Seenggaknya dengan nonton dan mendengar kabar terbaru dari tim kita, ya beli siapa nih, seenggaknya agak sedikit ini guys ya, agak sedikit terhibur lah gitu ya. Oke, tetap semangat, and as always my friends, have a lovely day.